Hello and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. Monday at my house filming. And this week, continuing with our pressed flowers make along, I am going to do a video on a couple of things that might be helpful when you're working on the shawl. Some clarification of the pattern without giving a lot of details of the pattern away, because I've said it many times on this channel. I firmly believe that you should buy the pattern. These videos are not intended to replace the pattern. They are intended to supplement. Amy Christoffers has done wonderful work on her patterns, and it's really worth the money spent on the pattern to get it and follow it. I am almost done with my shawl. It is really super bunched up on the needles here. But I've gotten some questions on my other videos about how following the pattern, because we've got charts and then we've got instructions that seem to be like, this row do this, this row do this, this row do that. And it's like, what is going on? I'm going to try to clarify with some general pictures why she wrote it that way, why she's got charts. And then she does have instructions of what to do around the charts. It is not as simple as why isn't it all charted? Because there's a little bit going on to simplify for the printing so the charts don't have to be itty bitty. So I'll try to review that and maybe give you some tips to help process what's happening from row 25 on. And I'm going to show you my tips for how I do the increases along the edge. There's little things with the make one rights and make one lefts that if you like how mine is coming out, how it looks, I'll show you how I do them. Again, not intending to replace the pattern, just to add to your experience of it based on my knowledge. And you might decide the way I'm doing it, you don't want to do it that way, and that's okay. So let's get to it. So one of the things about the pressed flowers shawl pattern, we have charts that are meant to be combined with other written instructions about the edges. So I've made a little diagram here to kind of help you see how the written instructions come together. Now, this is a picture of when the shawl is done, what it will look like, or where the pieces of it come into play. What can be confusing, a little confusing with all of this, is that the finished shawl looks like this, but this is where we start. We start right here. You start with your provisional cast on in your knitting up at the top at the middle, and the direction of your knitting is in this direction. And so this end spot will be your last row. That's why it is so bunched up on my needles right now. The charts look flipped upside down from what we might visually be seeing here because they're representing the direction of your knitting. So the charts we'll take a look at some drawings I have under here. The charts represent rows like this, and they're worked from bottom to top. So the chart has to be turned around. That's why the charts will have this shape, because they are growing as you make them. The direction of knitting on the chart is from bottom to top. The direction of knitting of the shawl as it looks when you're done feels like it goes this way. But the charts are always, I have another video on charts. Charts are always a representation of what hangs underneath your needle. Remember, when you finish, your needle is way down here. So if I say that this is one of the charts and how it visually looks in the pattern. So I've labeled a couple of things on here. When you start your shawl, the pressed flowers shawl, we start way up here. And the first thing you're doing is the setup chart. And the setup chart includes the edge, the center. It includes the whole entire thing when you look at it. I have not drawn that out in this video because most people are having questions about row 25 on, which is after the setup chart. But you do the setup chart first and everything is included. And then when you hit row 25, you have to go to a different chart that she on this pattern calls the repeat chart. And it's called that because you repeat that chart multiple times. And as it goes, you do more repeats of the center of that chart. But if you think about it, when you're knitting across, you have edge stitches, and there are 2 of them. Then you have the repeat chart, and then there is a middle spine stitch, this middle spine. The center is 1 stitch. And then you repeat the exact same thing you did over here. And then at the very end of your row, you have a 2-stitch edge stitch. So it's edge, chart, spine, chart, edge. And when you read the written instructions, it tries to map that out for you, but I totally understand some people are getting a little bit confused. There's a logic to it that if your brain doesn't function that way, and everyone's brains function differently to process information, it can be take a little bit of getting used to wrap your brain around. Once you get through the repeat chart, or the number of times that she says, there's the border chart, which functions in the same way. There's different stitches happening, or it's like variations on a theme, but you still have the edge stitches, border, middle spine, repeat the same thing you did over here, and then the edge again. Now, if she wrote that whole thing out, that would be a really, really big chunk on your pattern. If she tried to write the whole thing out in words, that would take pages. And if she tried to have the whole chart like she did for the setup, it's a bigger repeat out here. So she'd have to have twice as much information to have the whole thing across, including the edge stitches, so that her chart stays somewhat legible. What she's done is again, if you take this and flip it upside down, she's like, you're doing the same thing in the middle here, between the edge and the spine, that you're doing over here. They're exactly the same. The difference is what's on the borders. The first time you go through the chart, there's 2 extra stitches over here, and then there's a center stitch. And then on this side, on the way out, if you think about what's on either side, there's only 1 stitch on this side, which you've already done, and 2 stitches over here. So it's impossible. Well, not impossible, but it would be really challenging to try to include in a chart what's happening over here into the center, and then say, okay, skip the first 2 stitches and do it again, but then we'll have 2 different stitches over here. So what she's done is she's taken the thing that is absolutely identical side to side, and she's made a chart for that, for just what's inside the edging or the center. And she's tried in words to tell you what's happening in these 3 places. To just repeat this twice, if she threw in the edge stitches or the center spine to say do it twice, the numbers wouldn't work, because there's 1 stitch here and there's 2 stitches on the edge. So I'm going to move it down a little bit from the overall schematic to what you will see in the pattern in its most base form. So here I've written down a couple things. Here is an example of the shape of one of the charts. And again, it is, if we think about the overall shape of the shawl, if we viewed it right side up, what we're talking about is a chunk that's right in here. If we flip it around for the direction that the chart is telling us to work, the direction of knitting here, if we flip that around, we get this trapezoid. And this is the thing that is repeated twice. This spot and this spot. I know that's not a scale diagram, but this thing that we can now flip around, it's repeated twice, but it has different edgings depending on the first or second time that you do it. On each row, though, the way that you use these charts, there's an edging, there's the chart, there's the center spine, there's the chart again, and then there's the edging. The edge is 2 stitches. The center spine is 1. The edge is 2. So if we think about this chart, the first time that you go through it on each row, the first time you have an edge, which is 2 stitches, and you have the center spine, which is only 1 stitch. And then the second time, you have the center on this side of your chart, which is actually already done. And the second time through the chart, you have an edge on this side. Which is 2 stitches. So even if you're like, well, fine, put the chart over here for the edge and the center over here, then what do you tell people to do on the second time through? You say, skip the first 2 stitches, do it again, but do these extra stitches over. Either way, it's confusing. So what she has chosen to do is, since there's a spot, there's something that's done, the main work of it is done twice. She has a chart for that you're going to do twice, but you're going to do edge stitches, the chart, the center spine, the chart, and then edge stitches. And then with her pattern, I've seen patterns where they do this very successfully because these edge stitches, center, do it again. They're all the same on every row. Or you have 2 sets of instructions, a right side row and a wrong side row. Why hers, if you've seen something like this, she's got, okay, on row 25, 29, 33, blah, 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 and it keeps going, do this. And then on row 26, 30, 34, blah, 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 do that. And on row 27, 31, 35, do this. 28, that might sound super confusing. It's not as confusing as it looks if we take out the bulk of what it's telling you to do just to process what's happening. Essentially, we've talked about with mosaic. With mosaic, each color gets 2 rows by itself. So we have we could say main color or contrast color. So because of how her rows start, contrast color, right side row, contrast color, wrong side row. Main color, right side row, main color, wrong side row. She has it's a 4-row repeat where the center chunk will change depending on what row of the chart you're on. But these, if we pull out the rows she's giving us instructions for and look at the instructions for that row in a second, like not with this video on your chart, but if we pull out those numbers, we have 25, 26, 27, and 28. And then you go back to 29, 30, 31, and 32. 33, 34, 35, 36. It may look like a lot of numbers and seem confusing. If we break it down, there is a 4-row repeat to what happens at the edge, the center, and the edge. Now the charts in there, those go through more than a 4-row repeat. But we have a contrast color right side row, a contrast color wrong side row, a main color right side row, and a main color wrong side row. And it really is especially the edge stitches and the center spine that different things might be happening depending on these 4 rows. So that's where the word descriptions come into play. And then after that, it's paying attention to what row of the chart you're on. So if it helps, knowing if you're on a contrast color right side or wrong side row or a main color right side or wrong side row, that rhythm might start to sink in over time and you won't have to use the words quite as much. But when in doubt, use all of the words with the chart. But essentially, you've got the charts to follow and they're going to happen twice. And then the edging and the center will depend on which color you're using, contrast, or main, and if you're on a right side or wrong side row. The instructions for what to do with the yarn are slightly different depending on that. So again, these words here, all of this stuff about all these numbers and everything are trying to break down contrast color right side or contrast color wrong side, or main color right side or main color wrong side. These instructions have to do with the edge and center spine. They are the instructions for the edge and the center, and then the opposite edge. So we could say edges, right? And then between those, we have the chart. Yep, there's my cat. So every row, whether you're doing a right side or a wrong side, you will have an edge, do the chart, that is that chart for that moment, the center spine, do the chart again, and then edge. And even if you're on a wrong side row that you can be like, well, it's got to go back the other way, it's still an edge, chart, center spine, chart, edge. Now, the other thing I'd like to go over, which I will do with my shawl itself, is the reason that these charts have this trapezoid shape is every time you do the chart, you're increasing. And it doesn't matter, every time you do it, you have a make one right, which she calls an MR on this side, and you have a make one left, which she calls an ML on that side. That's why these charts have this shape, because they keep increasing stitches. The number of repeats in the center may increase, but you're always increasing one stitch on the sides on your right side rows. And how I do that personally differs when I have my main color, my contrast color. So I'm going to show you that now with my shawl. All right, so what I have here is the beginning. I've just finished a main color row. Here's my contrast. I like leaving the color you just, let me move that a little, the color you just knit with hanging in front, and pick up the other color from behind, because that will give it kind of a, it's going to be bumpy because it is garter, but it gives it a clean look, I think. So how my edges have ended up looking like this is I pick that up, and this border is very similar to a row 25, although I am much further along in my shawl. I'm on the border charts here. But a row 25 says to knit your first stitch. Usually when you're working flat, your first stitch will be in the color you're going to carry across the row. And then it wants you to slip purlwise the second stitch. That's your border right there. 2 stitches, knit one, slip one with your contrast color. And then heading into the chart, it tells you to make one right. And make one right is to take that strand that's at the very top there. I do something a little different with my main color, which you'll all see in a second, but it is to make one right, we're going to take that strand, grab it from behind. Right means rear is how I remember. With my left needle, I pick it up from behind, and then if we knit into the back, we'd have a yarn over basically. We'd have a hole. If you knit into the front, it's a make one right, and it is nice and tight. So that's a make one right. And then it is time to follow whatever the instructions say for your chart. And that could be knitting and slipping in a certain order. All the way across until you're at the end of the chart. There'll be another increase over there. And I'll meet you over there to show you what happens at the center spine. This is our first time through the chart. We have the edge stitches. We're heading towards the center spine. All right, I am just about at my center spine here. My instructions for this row have me slipping the last stitch on the chart and then doing a make one left. All of the right side rows will have a make one left. When I'm doing it with contrast color, I just go for the top strand here. Make one left, I pick it up with my left needle from the front to the back, It's the opposite of a make one right, and I knit into the back, which is the hardest way possible. So I finished my chart. Now my instructions for row 25 say to slip the marker, to slip this middle stitch, to slip the marker, and then to work my chart again. And my chart starts with a make one right. So I'm going to scoop from the rear to make one right this strand in between the last stitch and the next one. And I'm going to knit into the front. I might have to roll that pick up a little bit to get purchase, but knit into the front so it's really tight. And then I can go with my instructions again for whatever the row is telling me to do. And that's going to be different depending on what row of the chart you're on. So I'm going to do my chart the whole way over, and I will meet you at the other side to end this chart one more time, my second repeat of the chart. I'll see you over there, and we'll do the far border, the far edge. All right, I'm at the end of my row here. I'm nearing the end of my chart. Slip one. The last part of there's 2 stitches left, and that's okay, because the last part of my chart, those are the border stitches. Last part of my chart, just like the first time, I need to make one left, so I'm going to scoop the strand from the front to make one left and knit it into the back. And then the border edge for row 25 and the rows that are contrast color, right side row, it's slip one, knit one. Now it's time for row 26 or any of the rows that are the wrong side. See, it's all busy on the wrong side. Wrong side row, contrast color. The edge stitches say to knit one and slip one with yarn in front. Remember, we slip with the yarn on the wrong side, which is the front right now. And then we do the chart, and the chart doesn't have increases on the wrong side rows. So it's going to be working the stitches of the same color, whether it's knit or purl depends on if it's a solitary. Should say whether it's knit or purl with your contrast color depends on if it's a stitch by itself. That one's knit. And the ones that are together, like these 3, because they're flowers, we purl. But follow your chart, slip one, knit one. Always slip with the yarn on the wrong side of the work. With the flowers, when there's a bunch of contrast colors together, you're going to purl. And when there's a single stitch, you're going to knit it. But you're always slipping the other color and working the same as your color on the way back. And that holds for the center spine stitch too. That is going to be your main color, so you're going to slip that one when you come to it. And on your edge stitches, you're going to knit the ones that are the same as your contrast color, and you're going to slip the ones that are your main color. So after we've done 2 contrast color rows, keeping them in the same order as what I was showing you on the whiteboard, we've just finished our contrast color wrong side row. We're going to leave that hanging in front and pick up the main color from behind. Now this is kind of like a row 27. It just says to knit 2. We're not going to slip any border stitches with our main background color. Now, the make one right might be a little bit confusing in here because we have the 2 rows of the contrast color. Make one right is usually done with picking up a strand between these 2 stitches. I think it looks a lot cleaner to dip down and pick up the last main color strand that we have. It's way down here. But the reason we don't have a lot of excess contrast color along the edge, which might make the edge super busy, is this whole shawl, I've been picking up this strand down here. So instead of picking up the last strand I see, I'll show you what that would look like. We might get an extra little bump of color there. I like the contrast color only popping out when absolutely necessary. So I'm going to go down to here. I'm going to grab the last strand going across of the same color that I'm increasing with right now. I didn't do that with my contrast color because it's like having more of the main color in the background works, I think. So I'm digging way down to this last dark green for mine, and it's a make one right, so I'm picking it up from the rear. I'm ignoring these top 2 strands of contrast, and I'm picking this up from the rear and knitting into the front, which is the most complicated way possible to twist it. And I just like the look of that. Like, we might have a little bit of contrast color pop out, but along this border, there's a lot more main color. So now that I've done that, knit 2, and I've done my make one right into the last strand of my main color, I can start working on my row. And I'm on a random row in the border. So I'm going to go across with my knitting and slipping where the pattern tells me to. It's going to take me a while. I would join you at the end of this first repeat of the chart. I will be at the center spine. And I'll see you over there. All right, I am almost to the center spine here with my 2 little stitch markers. And this, again, remember, I am in the border chart, so it is probably very different if you're just starting out from where you are. I'll see if I can get my other crazy colors out of the way. This row for me happens to have 3 slip stitches, and I'm right at the center spine. I need to do a make one left. You may have knit stitches right before this. It's all good. Again, I'm not going to do my increase. You can totally do your increase into one of these contrast colors if you want. I like going down to the last strand of my main color. But this, I'm picking it up right now like a make one right. I need to do a make one left. So I need to come under from the front and knit into the back. Another thing you can do if you want to pick up with your right needle, you can totally scoop that guy from the back. Just make sure you're getting the strand and not the center. The other thing I could have done is if I pick it up from the back, a make one left, you want it situated the other way on your needle. So we could scoop from the back and plop it. That probably looks like a whole lot of craziness going on. Just to show you, if I do this, the make one left with the contrast color, right here it might not show because I have other contrast colors there, and other times it might show quite a bit more than we want. So again, I'm going to try to scoop under from the front this last strand of my main color. As a make one left, you want to pick it up with your left needle from front to back. And then we want to knit into the back. We want to knit it the hardest way possible. There'll be a little bubble of contrast color there, but it tends to settle down later. Slip our stitch marker, knit our center spine stitch, slip our stitch marker. Now we want to do a make one right. And again, I'm going to jump over my contrast colors. I'm going to grab the strand of my main color that's down there a little bit, and I'm going to knit into it. And again, those colors will settle a little bit, but I feel like the twist right under, I like having the twist that's right under my needle be my main color. Now I get to take off with my row here. And I'll see you out on the other side. All right, I am almost to the edge here. I'm finishing my chart. My chart ends 2 stitches before the end because those are my border stitches, but the chart ends with a make one left, which again, I'm going to skip over these guys and I'm going to pull up. I'm going to try pulling up from the front if I can because it's a make one left, and that one you want your left needle to go in from front to back, and then you're going to knit into the back. And see, the other strands want to pop forward. They will settle back with time, those contrast colors. So I knit into the back. I'm at the end of my chart, and then I read the instructions for that row. Let's say it's a row 27. It's a right side row with my main color. I'm knitting the last 2 stitches. Now I'm going to turn around and I'm going to do like a row 28 where I don't want to get super confused. I could totally have a stitch marker out here to kind of help delineate my border stitches. I don't happen to have that. I think that's very helpful if you want to have that. Row 28 says to knit 2. And then we're going to do the chart. On your wrong side rows, you won't be increasing. You'll just be most likely knitting that last stitch that you increased. I've probably said this before, but I'm trying to say it every time I do a right side or wrong side row. And then just like we talked about with charts before, we're slipping stitches of the other color and working stitches of the same color on our way back. And we're slipping stitches with yarn to the wrong side of the work, and that's what's facing us. And with your main color on these flat knit pieces like the shawl and the cowl and the body of the cardigan, your main color is always knitting both sides. Your contrast color sometimes is purling. Again, it's different if you're doing things in the round. So the spine stitch is knit and the other border stitches with this main color are knit. So I'm not going to show you the rest of this row like I did with the contrast row because the contrast row is a little bit different. So thanks for joining us. I'm still in the middle of a row here, but thanks for joining us for some tips and tricks on the shawl pattern, the pressed flowers shawl pattern, and what goes into helping you be successful with that. Again, not giving away too many details of the pattern because you should really buy the pattern by Amy Christoffers. But if you have the pattern already and you're struggling with it, I hope these tips have helped a little bit. I still have at least one more video I'd like to make in this series on how doing her pattern in the round is different than doing it flat. I may not be able to do that next week though, because we are having on Sunday, next Sunday, April 23rd, we are having our, what we call our dual platform virtual sit and stitch event for Sun Dragon. I'll still be sitting here, but I'll have Facebook Live going and I'll have Zoom going from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern US Standard Time. You can jump on or jump off or see what's going on with that. That's a general sit and stitch. It's not pressed flowers specific, but you could always jump on and share how your piece is going, that kind of thing. It is not necessarily like in-depth instruction time, but it is a time to share and you could potentially ask questions of the group, that kind of thing. When I have an event like that, though, it usually means I'm pretty tuckered out the next day, so I'm not sure if I'll be making a video next week. I will try to make a video coming up about doing things circularly, which involves the hat, the sleeves for the cardigan, and also for her just released, super exciting, just released pullover sweater for pressed flowers, because that one is top down in the round. We'll get to what we can with that, but when you are doing garter in the round, you have to do different things than garter flat. So, a lot more purling involved in that one. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been helpful. If you're not subscribed to this channel, please consider subscribing. It is free of charge and it just helps our numbers. It helps the YouTube algorithm know that more people might benefit from watching these videos. If you'd like to monetarily support the work we do, we have super thanks tips, we have memberships, we have patreon.com/sundragon, and you get swag over there if you stick with us for 3 months. Anything you can do, just watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, all of it's wonderful. Thanks for joining us. And as I always like to say, may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hello, kitty. I'm gonna go film. You gonna be okay? Oh, that's my hand. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll let you be.